Since the beginning of recorded history, humans have longed to know what lies ahead. We consult horoscopes, study trends, and wonder what tomorrow might bring. Most predictions fade into obscurity, forgotten guesses that never came true. But some did not fade. Some proved disturbingly accurate. In the 16th century, a French physician wrote cryptic verses that allegedly named a dictator who would not be born for another 400 years. In 20th century Bulgaria, a blind woman who could not read or write described towers falling in America decades before September 11, 2001. In the 1800s, a novelist placed a moon launch in Florida with 3 astronauts aboard a century before Apollo 11 lifted off from the exact same location. These were not vague guesses, open to endless interpretation. These were specific predictions, documented in books, testimonies, and manuscripts that still exist today. Scholars have studied them. Skeptics have tried to debunk them. Believers have built movements around them. A prophet who wrote in code, a mystic who saw through blind eyes, a writer whose fiction became science. Were they extraordinarily lucky? Were they brilliant minds who simply saw patterns others missed? Or did they possess something we cannot explain, a genuine glimpse through the curtain of time? The evidence is waiting. The desire to know the future is as old as humanity itself. In ancient Babylon, priests studied the movements of stars to predict the fates of kings. In Greece, pilgrims traveled for weeks to reach the oracle at Delphi, hoping for a glimpse of what lay ahead. In China, emperors consulted diviners who read cracks in heated bones. Across every culture and every century, humans have sought ways to pierce the veil between present and future. This longing makes sense. Knowing what comes next offers power and protection. A farmer who knows when droughts will strike can prepare. A king who knows when enemies will attack can defend. A merchant who knows when prices will rise can profit. The future, if it could be known, would transform uncertainty into advantage. Yet most predictions fail. History is littered with prophecies that never came true, dates when the world was supposed to end, and confident forecasts that proved laughably wrong. For every prediction that seems accurate, thousands have been forgotten because they missed the mark entirely. This is precisely what makes certain predictions so remarkable. When a forecast proves accurate not vaguely, but specifically, it demands attention. When the evidence survives for centuries, allowing us to verify what was written before events occurred, the mystery deepens. We are forced to ask how anyone could have known. Throughout history, those who claim to see the future have described very different methods for their visions. Some spoke of divine revelation, messages from gods or spirits that revealed what was to come. Others relied on astrology, believing that the positions of planets and stars shaped human destiny. Still others used trance states, dreams, or meditation to access knowledge beyond ordinary perception. In more recent centuries, a different approach emerged: scientific. This method requires no supernatural gifts. It simply involves understanding current trends and technologies so deeply that future developments become predictable. A scientist who understands electricity might foresee wireless communication. An engineer who understands ballistics might imagine space travel. This kind of prediction is impressive, but explainable. The challenge comes when predictions do not fit neatly into any category. What do we make of a prophet who names a future dictator using an unusual spelling? How do we explain a blind woman describing events she could never have researched? What about a novelist whose technical specifications match reality with uncomfortable precision? These are the cases that continue to fascinate researchers, skeptics, and believers alike. They resist easy explanation. They leave behind evidence that cannot simply be dismissed. And they raise questions about human consciousness, time, and the nature of knowledge that science has not fully answered. The 3 figures we will examine represent vastly different eras, cultures, and approaches to prophecy, yet each left behind documented predictions that allegedly came true, sometimes with startling specificity. Nostradamus lived in 16th century France, a time of religious wars and political upheaval. He was trained as a physician, but became famous for his cryptic verses, written in a code of mixed languages and obscure references. His book of prophecies has never gone out of print in over 450 years. Believers claim he predicted the French Revolution, Napoleon, Hitler, and the attacks of September 11th. Skeptics argue his verses are so vague they can be made to fit almost anything. Baba Vanga lived in 20th century Bulgaria, a blind woman who received thousands of visitors seeking guidance. She claimed that invisible beings revealed the future to her. Communist officials studied her abilities. Foreign leaders sought her counsel. Her followers credit her with predicting Chernobyl, the fall of the Soviet Union, and global events extending into the distant future. Critics point out that many of her predictions were only recorded after the events occurred. Jules Verne lived in 19th century France, a novelist who combined scientific research with extraordinary imagination. He did not claim supernatural powers. He simply wrote adventure stories that happened to describe technologies with remarkable accuracy. His moon landing, his submarines, his video communications all appeared in fiction decades before they became reality. 3 different paths to the future, 3 different kinds of evidence, and 3 enduring mysteries that continue to inspire debate. Their stories begin in the plague-ravaged towns of Renaissance France. Michel de Nostradame was born on December 14th, 1503, in the town of Saint-Remy de Provence in southern France. His family was of Jewish origin, but had converted to Catholicism to avoid persecution during a time of religious intolerance. The young Michel showed exceptional intelligence from an early age. His grandfather reportedly taught him Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and mathematics before he entered formal schooling. As a young man, Nostradamus studied at the University of Avignon before pursuing medicine at the University of Montpellier, one of the most respected medical schools in Europe. He proved to be a capable physician, particularly skilled in treating victims of the bubonic plague that periodically devastated European cities. His methods were unconventional for the time. He emphasized fresh air, clean water, and herbal remedies rather than the bloodletting and harsh treatments favored by other doctors. For a time, Nostradamus seemed destined for a successful medical career. He married, had 2 children, and built a reputation as a healer. Then, tragedy struck. Around 1534, plague swept through his region, and despite all his medical skill, his wife and children died. The loss shattered him. The man who had saved so many strangers could not save his own family. In the years following this personal devastation, Nostradamus wandered across France and Italy. Something changed within him during this period of grief and searching. He began studying astrology, alchemy, and the occult traditions that existed alongside mainstream medicine in Renaissance Europe. He claimed to experience visions, glimpses of future events that came to him during long nights of meditation. By the 1550s, Nostradamus had settled in the town of Salon de Provence. He began publishing almanacs containing predictions for the coming year, weather forecasts, agricultural advice, and hints about political events. These proved popular enough that he decided to attempt something far more ambitious, a book of prophecies covering not just the next year but centuries to come. In 1555, Nostradamus published the first edition of Les Prophéties, a collection of prophecies organized into groups called centuries, each containing 100 quatrains, 4-line verses of cryptic poetry. Eventually, he would write nearly 1,000 of these quatrains, covering events he claimed would occur over the next several thousand years. The verses were deliberately obscure. Nostradamus wrote in a mixture of French, Latin, Greek, and Occitan, the regional language of southern France. He used anagrams, where letters of words were rearranged to hide their meaning. He employed astrological symbols and classical references that only educated readers could understand. He jumbled chronology so that predictions were not arranged in any clear order. Why write in such impenetrable code? Nostradamus himself offered an explanation. He feared that if his prophecies were too clear, he would be accused of witchcraft or heresy by the Catholic Church. The Inquisition was active in France during his lifetime, and those suspected of dealing with dark powers faced imprisonment, torture, or death. By veiling his predictions in mystery, Nostradamus could share his visions while maintaining plausible deniability. Despite their difficulty, the prophecies attracted immediate attention. Catherine de' Medici, the powerful queen of France, summoned Nostradamus to Paris to discuss his predictions about the royal family. He became a favorite at court, casting horoscopes for the queen's children and advising on matters of state. His fame spread across Europe, bringing both admirers and critics. Nostradamus continued writing until his death on July 2nd, 1566. According to legend, he predicted the exact date of his own passing. He reportedly told his secretary on the evening of July 1st, "You will not find me alive at sunrise." The next morning, he was found dead beside his bed. One of the most frequently cited Nostradamus predictions concerns the Great Fire of London in 1666. Quatrain 251 reads, in translation, "The blood of the just will be demanded of London, burnt by fire in the year 3 times 20 and 6. The phrase 3 times 20 and 6 equals 6, which believers interpret as a reference to 1666, the year the fire actually occurred. The Great Fire destroyed much of medieval London over 4 days in September 1666. The coincidence of the number 66 appearing in a prediction about fire, and London has convinced many that Nostradamus foresaw this disaster a century before it happened. Several quatrains seem to describe the French Revolution of 1789, which occurred over 2 centuries after Nostradamus died. References to common people rising against the monarchy, to violence and upheaval in France, and to a king being captured have been interpreted as predictions of Louis XVI's overthrow and execution. Quatrain Las 9:20, for example, speaks of a journey by night, a king fleeing through a forest, and capture at a place beginning with V. Louis XVI's failed escape attempt in 1791 ended with his arrest at Varennes, a name that fits the prediction remarkably well. Nostradamus appears to have used anagrams to hide the names of future leaders. The name Napoleon Roy, an anagram for Napoleon, appears in some interpretations of his verses, references to an emperor who would rise from humble origins near Italy and conquer much of Europe seem consistent with Napoleon's career. Even more controversially, the word hister appears in several quatrains, which believers claim is a near-perfect rendering of Hitler. The verses describe a leader associated with Germany who brings terrible war and destruction. Skeptics note that hister was also the Latin name for the Danube River, but the phonetic similarity to Hitler remains striking. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, interest in Nostradamus exploded. Believers pointed to verses describing fire in a great new city, towers falling, and attacks from the sky. Some interpretations were later revealed to be hoaxes, fabricated quatrains spread through the early internet, but genuine verses exist that some researchers find disturbingly relevant. The debate continues. The original texts of Les Prophéties survive in libraries across Europe, allowing scholars to examine exactly what Nostradamus wrote, whether his words truly predicted the future or simply offer enough vagueness to match any major event remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Figure 2. Baba Vanga, the blind prophet of the Balkans, 1911 to 1996. The girl who lost her sight, a childhood interrupted. Vandilia Pandeva Gustarova was born on January 31st, 1911, in Strumica, a town in what was then the Ottoman Empire and is now North Macedonia. Her early years were marked by hardship. Her mother died when Vangelia was young, and her father, a farmer, struggled to provide for his children. Until the age of 12, Vangelia was an ordinary child with normal sight. Then something happened that would transform her life entirely. Accounts vary slightly, but the most common version describes a powerful storm, possibly a tornado, that swept through her village. Young Vangelia was caught in the wind and carried some distance before being dropped in a field. When rescuers found her days later, her eyes were covered with sand and debris, and she was in terrible pain. Despite attempts at treatment, the damage was too severe. Over the following months, Vangelia gradually lost her sight completely. By her teenage years, she was totally blind. Yet as her physical vision faded, she claimed a different kind of sight began to emerge. The emergence of visions, according to her own accounts and those of people who knew her, Vangelia began experiencing strange visions and perceptions. She claimed she could sense things about people that she had no way of knowing details about their pasts, their families, their secrets. She said that invisible beings spoke to her, revealing information about events far away and times yet to come. At first, these experiences frightened her. She was a simple village girl with no education, living in a poor rural community. But word of her apparent abilities began to spread through the region. Neighbors came to ask about missing relatives or lost items. Many left astonished by the accuracy of her answers. The prophetess of Petric rising fame during war and peace. In 1942, Vangelia married Dimitar Gushtarov, a Bulgarian soldier who had come to consult her about his brother's death. She moved with him to the town of Petric in Bulgaria, where she would spend the rest of her life. It was here that she became known as Baba Vanga, Grandmother Vanga, a title of respect. During World War II, her fame grew dramatically. Soldiers and their families sought her out, desperate for news about loved ones fighting on distant fronts. She would hold an object belonging to the person in question, a piece of clothing, a photograph, a letter, and pronounce whether they were alive or dead. Many witnesses reported that her pronouncements proved accurate. After the war, communist authorities in Bulgaria took an unusual interest in Baba Vanga. Rather than suppressing her as a relic of superstition, the government studied her abilities. Scientists and psychologists were sent to examine her claims. Some officials consulted her privately. She became, in effect, a state-sanctioned, mystica, unique position in the officially atheist, communist bloc. The method of sugar cubes. Baba Vanga developed a distinctive method for her consultations. Visitors were asked to bring sugar cubes that they had kept under their pillows overnight. She would hold these cubes in her hands and enter a trance-like state. Then she would speak, sometimes in her own voice, sometimes in a strange tone that observers described as otherworldly. She received thousands of visitors each year for decades. Foreign dignitaries, celebrities, and ordinary people seeking guidance all made the pilgrimage to her modest home in Petric. She rarely charged for her services, though visitors typically brought gifts. She lived simply until her death on August 11th, 1996. The predictions attributed to her: Chernobyl and the fall of the Soviet Union. Among the most dramatic predictions attributed to Baba Vanga is a warning about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986. She allegedly told visitors years earlier that Ukraine would experience a great catastrophe, that the land would be poisoned, and that people would suffer for generations. The explosion at the Chernobyl reactor and the resulting radioactive contamination seemed to match this description closely. She is also credited with predicting the dissolution of the Soviet Union before any visible signs of its collapse appeared. According to witnesses, she spoke in the 1980s of the great empire falling apart, of the republics going their separate ways. When the Soviet Union officially dissolved in 1991, believers saw this as confirmation of her powers. September 11th and the Steel Birds. Perhaps the most famous prediction attributed to Baba Vanga concerns the September 11th, 2001 attacks on the United States. She allegedly said, years before the event, that 2 steel birds would attack the American brothers and that innocent blood will gush. The phrase steel birds has been interpreted as a description of the hijacked airplanes, and American brothers as the Twin Towers. The timing of when this prediction was made and first recorded remains controversial. Skeptics point out that many of Baba Vanga's most impressive prophecies only surfaced publicly after the events they supposedly predicted. Predictions for the future. Baba Vanga reportedly made predictions extending far into the future, some reaching to the 51st century. She spoke of a third world war, of changes in the Earth's orbit, of humanity eventually leaving the planet. She predicted that Europe would become a desolate wasteland by the end of the 21st century, and that a great leader would emerge from Russia. These future predictions cannot be verified yet. Some have already failed to materialize on the dates given. Others remain far enough in the future that only time will reveal their accuracy or inaccuracy. Jules Gabriel Verne was born on February 8, 1828, in Nantes, a busy port city in northwestern France. From an early age, he was fascinated by ships, travel, and adventure. His father was a lawyer and expected Jules to follow in his profession, but the young man's heart belonged to literature and exploration. After reluctantly studying law in Paris, Verne began writing plays and short stories. He achieved modest success, but had not yet found his true calling. That changed in 1862 when he met Pierre, a publisher who recognized something special in Verne's combination of scientific knowledge and storytelling ability. Hetzel proposed a partnership that would transform both their careers. He commissioned Verne to write a series of novels he called Voyages Extraordinaires, extraordinary journeys. These would be adventure stories grounded in real science, tales that would educate readers while entertaining them. The series would eventually include over 60 novels, making Verne one of the most widely read authors in the world. What set Verne apart from earlier writers of fantastic fiction was his commitment to scientific accuracy. He did not simply imagine wonders. He researched them. His personal library contained thousands of books on geography, physics, chemistry, engineering, and exploration. He corresponded with scientists and inventors. He visited factories, shipyards, and laboratories to understand how technology worked. This grounding in reality gave his fiction a different quality. When Verne wrote about a submarine, he included technical specifications that made sense. When he wrote about a journey to the moon, he calculated the physics of space travel. His imagination was vast, but it was always tethered to what science suggested might be possible. Verne's method involved taking existing scientific principles and extending them to their logical conclusions. Submarines already existed in primitive form during his lifetime. Electric batteries were being developed. Rockets were understood in principle, if not yet in practice. Verne took these seeds and grew them into fully realized visions of future technology. He also surrounded himself with experts. His publisher Hetzel employed a team of researchers to help verify scientific details. Verne consulted with engineers about the feasibility of his ideas. This collaborative approach helped ensure that his fiction, while imaginative, remained within the bounds of theoretical possibility. The result was fiction that read like prophecy. Readers could sense that the technologies Verne described were not magic but engineering devices that might actually be built someday. In 1865, Verne published From the Earth to the Moon, a novel about three men who travel to the moon in a projectile launched from a giant cannon. The parallels to the actual Apollo 11 mission of 1969 are remarkable. Verne placed his launch site in Florida, as NASA would do over a century later. His spacecraft carried 3 astronauts, as Apollo 11 did. His travelers splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, as the returning Apollo capsule would. Even more striking are the technical details. Verne calculated the velocity needed to escape Earth's gravity with surprising accuracy. He specified a launch site at a latitude that made scientific sense. He considered the effects of weightlessness and the need for oxygen supply. While his cannon launch would have killed any real passengers from the acceleration, his understanding of the basic physics was sound. Published in 1870, this novel introduced Captain Nemo and his incredible submarine, the Nautilus. Verne described an electrically powered vessel capable of extended underwater travel, equipped with large viewing windows, advanced air recycling systems, and the ability to dive to great depths. Real submarines of the 1870s were primitive, craft-hand-powered, dangerous, and limited in capability. Verne imagined something far more advanced. Within decades, electric submarines would become reality. Within a century, nuclear-powered vessels would roam the oceans much as the Nautilus did. Perhaps the most remarkable evidence of Verne's predictive powers remained hidden for over a century. In 1863, he wrote a novel called Paris in the 20th Century, imagining the city as it might appear in 1960. His publisher rejected it as too dark and too unbelievable. The manuscript was lost until 1989, when Verne's great-grandson discovered it in a locked safe. When the novel was finally published in 1994, readers were astonished. Verne had predicted automobiles powered by gas and electricity, elevated trains, and underground railways, electric lights illuminating the city at night, calculating machines that sound remarkably like computers, and a society obsessed with commerce and technology at the expense of art and culture. He had predicted the 20th century with uncanny accuracy, and no one knew it until that century was nearly over. What would it mean to see the future? We often imagine prophecy as a gift, a power that would bring fame and fortune, but the lives of those who claimed this ability tell a different story. Their foresight, if genuine, brought as much sorrow as satisfaction. Nostradamus lost his wife and children to plague before his prophetic career began. Some scholars believe this tragedy opened something within him, a sensitivity to the fragility of life and the inevitability of suffering. His quatrains are filled with war, disaster, and death. He wrote in code partly from fear of persecution, spending his final years surrounded by suspicion as well as admiration. He saw the future, if he saw it at all, and what he saw was often terrible. Baba Vanga spent her entire adult life receiving visitors who came with grief and desperation, mothers seeking news of dead sons, spouses hoping their partners might still be alive, people terrified of what tomorrow might bring. She sat in darkness, blind and aging, delivering news that was often painful. She reportedly said that her gift was more burden than blessing, that knowing what was coming brought no peace. Even Jules Verne, who claimed no supernatural abilities, experienced a strange kind of prophetic isolation. His most accurate novel, Paris, in the 20th century, was rejected because its vision was too dark. He saw a future of technology without soul, progress without purpose, and his publisher told him no one wanted to read such things. The book sat locked away for over a century, while the world became exactly what Verne had imagined. There is something striking about the nature of prophecy across cultures and centuries. Those who claim to see ahead rarely describe paradise. Their visions are filled with catastrophe fires, floods, wars, and falling towers. Even when they predict positive developments, the focus tends toward the difficult transitions required to reach them. Perhaps this reflects something true about human psychology. We are drawn to warnings more than promises. Fear motivates action in ways that hope does not. Or perhaps genuine foresight, if it exists, tends to reveal crisis points rather than peaceful continuity. The future that demands attention is the future that threatens. Whatever the explanation, the prophetic life appears to be a troubled one. Those who claim to see tomorrow often seem burdened by the weight of what they perceive. The enduring popularity of prophetic figures reveals something important about human nature. We want the future to be knowable. We want the universe to have order and purpose. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, understands what is coming, even if we ourselves do not. This desire is not irrational. The world often feels chaotic and unpredictable. Wars erupt without warning. Economies collapse. Disasters strike. In the face of such uncertainty, the idea that certain individuals can pierce the veil of time offers comfort. If the future can be known, then perhaps it can be prepared for. If prophets exist, then perhaps the universe is not as random as it seems. This need for meaning helps explain why prophetic figures attract devoted followers across cultures and centuries. Nostradamus has been continuously in print for over 450 years. Baba Vanga's predictions are discussed and debated decades after her death. Jules Verne's novels remain beloved, not just as entertainment, but as evidence that imagination can transcend time. We return to these figures because they offer something we crave, the suggestion that the future is not an empty void, but a story already written, waiting to be revealed. Yet our relationship with prophecy is complicated. We want to know the future, but we also fear knowing it. The predictions that capture our attention are often the most disturbing: the wars, the disasters, the fallen towers. We are drawn to these dark visions, even as they trouble us. Perhaps this ambivalence reflects the true nature of foresight. Knowing what lies ahead might bring relief from uncertainty, but it would also bring the burden of anticipation. We would live not in the present but in dread or expectation of what is coming. The prophets who claimed this knowledge often seemed haunted rather than empowered by it. There may be wisdom in the uncertainty we often wish we could escape. We now live in the world that Nostradamus, Baba Vanga, and Jules Verne allegedly predicted. The technologies Verne imagined surround submarines, spacecraft, video communication, electric transportation. The events that Nostradamus and Baba Vanga described have entered our history books: world wars, fallen towers, disasters, both natural and human-made. This realization invites reflection. If these individuals truly saw ahead, what might they say about our current moment? What warnings might they offer about the path we are traveling? What technologies, what conflicts, what transformations might be visible to prophetic eyes, but hidden from our ordinary perception? We cannot know. But their stories remind us that the future, whatever it holds, is not infinitely distant. The events that seem impossible today may be history tomorrow. The world that seems stable may be on the verge of transformation. Perhaps the greatest lesson from studying those who claim to see ahead is humility. We do not know what is coming. We cannot be certain which of today's predictions will prove accurate and which will be forgotten. But we can approach the future with openness, aware that it may surprise us in ways we cannot imagine, just as it surprised those who lived before us. We have journeyed through 5 centuries and 3 remarkable lives. A French physician who wrote riddles in a time of plague and persecution. a blind Bulgarian woman who received thousands of desperate seekers in her humble home, a novelist who researched tomorrow with the precision of a scientist and the imagination of a poet. These three figures could hardly be more different. Nostradamus claimed divine or astrological inspiration, writing in codes that scholars still debate. Baba Vanga described invisible beings who revealed secrets beyond ordinary perception. Jules Verne made no supernatural claims at all, relying instead on rigorous study and creative Their methods, their eras, and their cultures shared little in common, yet each left behind evidence that continues to challenge our understanding. Nostradamus's quatrains remain in print after 450 years, studied by believers and skeptics alike. Baba Vanga's predictions circulate across the internet, debated in dozens of languages. Verne's novels sit in libraries worldwide, their technical specifications eerily matched to technologies he never lived to see. What separates these three from the countless prophets and visionaries who have been forgotten? Perhaps it is the specificity of their claims. Perhaps it is the quality of the evidence they left behind. Or perhaps there was something genuinely unusual about their perception, some capacity to see beyond the horizon of ordinary time. After examining the evidence and considering the explanations, we are left with a question that has no final answer. Can the future truly be known before it arrives? Science tells us that time flows in one direction, that causes precede effects, that tomorrow cannot be seen until it becomes today. This understanding has served us well. It has built our technologies, cured our diseases, and explained much of the universe we inhabit, yet the cases we have examined do not fit neatly into this framework. Some predictions, particularly those of Jules Verne, can be explained through scientific Others seem to exceed what research and logic could have produced. The word Hister, appearing centuries before Hitler, the steel birds described before modern aviation, the Florida launch site imagined before space agencies existed. We can choose to dismiss these as coincidences, lucky guesses in a vast sea of failed predictions. This is a reasonable position, supported by the many prophecies that proved wrong. We can also choose to remain curious, acknowledging that our understanding of mind and time may be incomplete. This too is reasonable, supported by how much science has yet to explain. The honest path lies between blind belief and reflexive dismissal. We do not know how these individuals achieved what they achieved. We may never know, but their stories remind us that certainty is often an illusion, and mystery is not something to fear. Nostradamus, Baba Vanga, and Jules Verne all made predictions that have not yet come to pass. Nostradamus wrote of events extending to the year 3797. Baba Vanga allegedly described the future until 5079. Verne imagined technologies we have not yet developed. Should we pay attention to these remaining prophecies? Perhaps, not because they are certain to come true, but because they remind us that the future remains open. The world of tomorrow is being shaped by decisions made today. The predictions that prove accurate may do so not because they were inevitable, but because we made them so or failed to prevent them. The three visionaries we have examined lived fully in their present while somehow touching the future. They remind us that imagination and foresight are among humanity's greatest gifts. Whether or not they truly saw ahead, they inspire us to look ahead ourselves with curiosity, we humility, and we tope. The future is waiting. What we do with it is still ours to decide. We have explored three extraordinary lives and the mysteries they left behind. A prophet who wrote in code, a blind woman who saw through darkness, a novelist who invented tomorrow on the page. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these three figures do you find most convincing? Do the cryptic verses of Nostradamus reveal genuine foresight, or are they puzzles that can fit any answer? Was Baba Vanga truly gifted with sight beyond sight? Did Jules Verne simply research brilliantly, or was there something more to his uncanny accuracy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about other prophets or predictions that fascinate you. And consider this question. Do you believe some people can truly see the future? If this journey through history and mystery moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who loves exploring the unexplained. The future remains unwritten. Perhaps someone today is already seeing what lies ahead. Until next time, keep wondering.